She did everything right, and he still walked away. Not because she was too much and not because she wasn't enough. Something quieter killed it, something she never even saw happening. And by the time she noticed, it was already over. She replayed every conversation in her head, searching for the mistake, the wrong word, the wrong reaction. But the truth wasn't in any single moment. It was in a pattern most women are never taught to see. Here is the truth nobody tells you. In the next few minutes, you are going to hear the 6 invisible things that quietly destroy a woman's value in the eyes of an avoidant person. 6 things that feel like love but actually push them further away. 6 things that look like devotion from the outside but feel like pressure on the inside. And once you hear them, you won't be able to unsee them, not in your past relationships, and maybe not even in the one you're in right now. Before we go on, I want you to do something small. If you have ever felt like you were too much for someone who wanted less of you, type the word value in the comments right now, just that one word. You'll see in a second why that word matters more than you think and why it comes back at the end of this video. There is a strange kind of grief that comes with this particular ending. It's not the sharp grief of betrayal where you can point to one moment and say that's when it broke. It's a slower, duller ache. The grief of watching someone you love quietly step further and further away, one small retreat at a time without ever fully explaining why. You keep waiting for the conversation that will finally make sense of it, and it never quite comes. That is the part that stays with you the longest. Let's talk about how an avoidant mind actually works, because almost nobody explains this correctly. An avoidant person isn't cold, they aren't heartless, they are running a very old program, written long before you ever met them. Somewhere early in life, closeness got linked to danger. Maybe a parent who was warm one day and distant the next, teaching a small nervous system that love was unpredictable. Maybe a home where needing someone meant getting hurt or ignored or shut down. So the mind made a decision quietly, without asking permission. Closeness equals risk, distance equals safety. That decision never got updated. It just kept running in the background, year after year, relationship after relationship, like an old piece of software nobody ever bothered to fix. So when you show up as a woman who is warm, giving, present, emotionally open, strange happens inside them. Their body doesn't experience your love as comfort. It experiences your love as pressure. Not because your love is wrong, but because their internal alarm system was never taught to recognize safety. And under pressure, the oldest instinct in a human being takes over, retreat. This is why some of the most loving, most emotionally intelligent women end up watching an avoidant partner disappear right when things start to feel real. It was never a lack of value. It was a mismatch of nervous systems and 6 specific behaviors that quietly tipped the scale from magnetic to draining. And here is what makes this so hard to catch in real time. Emotional intelligence isn't just about reading other people, it's about reading the gap between intention and impact. You can mean something with your whole heart and still have it land as pressure on someone whose alarm system is tuned differently than yours. That gap between what you meant and what he felt is where most of these 6 patterns live. It's rarely about the words, it's almost always about timing, intensity, and rhythm. Let's go through them one at a time, slowly, because you need to actually feel where you might recognize yourself, not to judge yourself, just to see clearly the way you'd study a map before a trip. You want to actually arrive somewhere. Number 1, chasing him when he goes quiet. This is the most common one, and it's the most misunderstood. When an avoidant person pulls back, it feels unbearable. The silence becomes loud, it fills up the whole room. Your mind starts building stories at 3 in the morning. Did I do something wrong? Is he losing interest? Should I text again just to check? And so you do the thing that feels natural, the thing every instinct in your body is screaming at you to do. You reach out, you ask if everything is okay, you send another message when the first one goes unanswered, you explain, you clarify, you check in, hoping one more message will finally bring him back to the surface. Here is what is actually happening on his side, and it has nothing to do with how much he cares. Withdrawal for an avoidant person is not punishment, it is regulation. It is how his nervous system resets after too much closeness, the same way your body needs to exhale after holding your breath too long. He needs the space the way your lungs need air. But when you chase that space, when you fill the silence before he is ready to return on his own, you confirm his deepest fear without meaning to. That closeness always comes with pressure. That he can never just breathe without someone needing something from him in that exact moment. And this is the part that hurts the most. The chasing doesn't come from weakness, it comes from care. You chase because you love him, because the thought of losing that connection feels unbearable. But to an avoidant nervous system, the chase reads as intensity, and intensity reads as danger. The very thing meant to bring you closer pushes the door shut a little further, click by click, until one day it doesn't open at all. A woman who understands this doesn't disappear when he goes quiet. She doesn't punish him either with cold silence or passive-aggressive distance of her own. She simply keeps living. She lets the silence exist without rushing to fill it or fix it. She trusts that her value doesn't depend on his immediate response. And ironically, that stillness is what an avoidant person actually responds to, because it doesn't feel like a threat. It feels like room to breathe and room to come back on his own terms. Picture 2 versions of the exact same evening. In the first version, he goes quiet after a good weekend together. and she spends the night refreshing her phone, drafting messages, deleting them, wondering what changed. By morning, she has sent 3 texts and he has answered none of them. In the second version, she notices the silence, feels the same sting, but goes to dinner with a friend instead of staring at her screen. She doesn't perform indifference. She simply doesn't collapse into it. 2 nights, 2 very different signals sent to a nervous system that is always quietly reading the room for danger. Number 2, over-explaining yourself. This one is sneaky because it looks like honesty and it even looks like emotional intelligence. You feel a flicker of insecurity, so you explain your feelings in detail, hoping clarity will bring comfort. You justify why you reacted a certain way. You clarify your intentions before he's even asked, trying to close every gap where misunderstanding could grow. You want him to understand you fully, completely, so nothing gets misread and nothing gets lost in translation. But here is the problem. Over-explaining sends an unconscious signal, one that has nothing to do with your words and everything to do with your energy. It says, I need your approval to feel okay about myself. And an avoidant person who already associates emotional need with heaviness feels that signal instantly, even if he can't name it, even if he couldn't explain why he's pulling back. The more you explain, the more it can feel like you're handing him responsibility for your emotional state, like you're passing him a weight he never agreed to carry. And responsibility to someone wired for distance feels like the opposite of freedom. Value isn't built through explanation, it's built through calm certainty. A woman who knows her own worth doesn't need to convince anyone of her intentions over and over in different words, hoping one version finally lands. She states how she feels once clearly, honestly, and then she lets it exist without chasing agreement or reassurance. That kind of quiet confidence is rare, and rare things hold value naturally, without effort. Avoidants are drawn to steadiness precisely because their internal world is so unsteady underneath the surface. When you become the calm in the room instead of the explanation in the room, something in them quietly relaxes, even if they never say it out loud. Think about the difference between a text that says, I felt a little hurt earlier when you left the group chat, and a text that turns into 4 paragraphs explaining the entire history of why you feel that way, referencing 3 past conversations and ending with a question asking if that makes sense. The first version carries weight because it's short and it trusts itself. The second version, even though every word in it might be true, hands over your emotional stability for someone else to evaluate and approve. One sentence said with quiet certainty will always carry more weight than 5 paragraphs of justification. Now, before we go further, I want to pause here for a second, because this next part matters more than you might realize. If any of this is landing, if you are starting to recognize yourself in these patterns, do 2 things right now, not later, right now while it's fresh. First, comment the word value below so I know you are still here and paying attention, and so this reaches more women who need to hear it today. Second, hit subscribe, because the next 4 things we are about to cover are the ones that quietly do the most damage, the ones almost nobody talks about, and you do not want to miss them. Okay, let's keep going. Number 3, reacting emotionally to his silence. There is a difference between having emotions and performing them at someone who is withdrawn. When an avoidant person goes distant, it is completely natural to feel hurt, confused, even angry. Those feelings are valid, every single one of them. But what happens next is what determines everything that follows. If those feelings get expressed as accusations, as tears meant to pull him back into the room, as anger meant to punish his distance and make him feel the same pain you are feeling, something shifts in how he sees you, and it shifts fast. Avoidants already carry a quiet belief, often formed long before adulthood, that emotions are dangerous, that big feelings lead to a loss of control, that vulnerability ends in disappointment or abandonment. When you react with intensity to his withdrawal, even if your intensity is completely justified, even if anyone would feel exactly the same way in your position, it confirms that old belief he has been carrying his whole life. It tells his nervous system, see, this is why distance is safer. Emotional storms are exactly what I was trying to avoid by staying guarded in the first place. This does not mean you should suppress your feelings, swallow them down, and pretend everything is fine when it is not. Suppression is not strength. It is a different kind of self-abandonment, and it costs just as much in the long run. The key is regulation, not suppression, and the difference between the two changes everything. A woman who can feel deeply and still remain grounded, who can say, I am hurt, without falling apart or lashing out, becomes someone an avoidant person does not need to run from. She is not asking him to manage her emotions for her. She is showing him through her own steadiness that her emotions do not require managing at all. And that, more than almost anything else, builds a strange kind of trust in someone who has spent their whole life associating closeness with chaos. There is a version of emotional strength that gets mistaken for coldness, and it is worth separating the two clearly. Regulation is not pretending you do not care. It is feeling the full weight of the moment while still choosing your next move on purpose instead of on impulse. A regulated woman can say, "This distance is hard for me," and mean it completely without that sentence turning into a demand, a threat, or a test. That single skill, staying present with pain without being ruled by it, is one of the rarest and most attractive qualities a person can hold, avoidant partner or not. Number 4, being endlessly available. This one feels counterintuitive because we are taught from a young age that up consistently is a sign of good character, of reliability, of being a good partner. And in most relationships it is. But with an avoidant person, unlimited availability can quietly erode your value. Not because you are doing anything wrong, but because of how scarcity and desire actually work inside the human brain, avoidant or not. When you are always available, always ready to talk, always the one adjusting your schedule around his, always the one saying yes even when it costs you something, a strange thing happens to perceived value. It flattens out completely. There is no contrast left, nothing to notice, nothing to miss. Avoidants, ironically, often crave more connection when there is a little distance to reach across, a little gap that lets desire build naturally. Constant availability removes that gap entirely. And without it, the pursuing instinct, the part of him that would normally lean in and initiate, has nothing left to activate. This is not about playing games, keeping score, or pretending to be busy when you are not. That kind of strategy always feels hollow eventually, and people can sense manipulation even when they cannot name it. It is about actually having a life so full, so genuinely yours, that your availability is real instead of performed for effect. A woman with her own rhythm, her own friendships, her own goals and deadlines and plans is not hard to get because she is playing hard to get. She is hard to get because she is occupied living a life that does not revolve entirely around waiting by the phone. And that kind of woman is almost impossible for an avoidant person to stop thinking about, precisely because she is not standing there waiting for him to decide. There is a simple test for this. Ask yourself honestly what your week would look like if he never texted at all. If the honest answer is that nothing changes, that your plans, your work, your friendships, your hobbies stay exactly as full and exactly as satisfying, that is not coldness, that is wholeness. And it is magnetic in a way that trying never quite manages to be. But if the honest answer is that your entire week bends around the possibility of his message, that is the gap worth noticing, not with guilt, just with clear eyes, because that gap is often exactly where value quietly leaks out. Number 5, trying to fix him. This one comes from a beautiful place, and that is exactly why it is so dangerous, so easy to fall into without noticing. You see the wounded part of him underneath the distance. You see the fear driving the withdrawal. And you think, if I just love him enough, if I understand him deeply enough, if I read enough about attachment styles and explain his own patterns back to him with enough patience, he will heal. He will stop pulling away. He will finally let me all the way in completely permanently. But healing someone is not the same as loving someone. And an avoidant person can feel the difference, even if neither of you ever says it out loud. When you shift from partner to project manager of his emotional growth, the entire relationship changes shape underneath both of you. He starts to feel analyzed instead of accepted, dissected instead of desired. He starts to feel like every conversation is secretly a therapy session in disguise, every gentle question a hidden diagnosis. And nothing makes an avoidant person retreat faster, more completely, than feeling like they are being studied instead of simply wanted. There is a real difference between loving someone's growth and taking full responsibility for it. A woman who tries to fix him slowly loses herself in the process, becoming smaller, more anxious, more focused on his patterns and his wounds than her own life and her own healing. But a woman who accepts him as he currently is, exactly as he is right now, while still holding her own standards firmly in place, becomes something far more powerful and far more attractive. She becomes someone he wants to become better for on his own timeline, in his own way, not someone he feels quietly obligated to change for just to keep the peace. That distinction changes absolutely everything about how the relationship unfolds. Notice the language that creeps in when fixing takes over. You start narrating his behavior back to him, using words like pattern and trigger and attachment style in the middle of ordinary conversations that used to just be about dinner plans or weekend trips. It comes from good intentions, from books and videos that genuinely helped you understand him better. But somewhere along the way, understanding turned into monitoring, and monitoring turned into pressure. And pressure is the one thing an avoidant nervous system was built to escape from at almost any cost. There is an easy way to check if you have slipped into this role without realizing it. Notice how many of your recent conversations with him started with a question about his feelings, his patterns, his childhood, his fears, versus how many started with something happening in your own life, your own week, your own excitement about something completely unrelated to the relationship. If the ratio is quietly tilted almost entirely toward him, that is not closeness building. That is a slow trade where your own life gets smaller so his healing can get bigger, and it rarely ends the way you hoped it would. Number 6, abandoning yourself to keep the relationship. This is the quiet one, the one that happens so slowly, so gradually, that you do not even notice it until you look up one day and realize you do not fully recognize who you have become. It starts small, almost invisibly. You stop mentioning a boundary because you don't want to seem difficult or demanding. You cancel plans with friends just in case he finally wants to talk tonight. You lower your expectations quietly, telling yourself it's just easier this way, that you're being flexible instead of accommodating too much. You stop pursuing the things that used to make you feel alive and interesting and whole, because somewhere along the way, without a single dramatic moment, he became the center of gravity that everything else in your life started orbiting around. Here is the paradox nobody warns you about, and it is the one that matters most. The more you abandon yourself to hold on to an avoidant partner, the less magnetic you actually become to him. Value was never really about how much you gave, how much you bent, how much you shrank to fit into the space he had available. It was about how much of yourself remained intact while giving. An avoidant person, even without consciously realizing it, is always searching on some level for a partner who has a self-worth returning to. Someone with her own center of gravity. Someone who doesn't dissolve completely the moment love enters the room and gets comfortable. When you disappear into the relationship piece by piece, there is nothing distinct left for him to be pulled toward, nothing separate to miss or wonder about. Attraction, real attraction, the kind that lasts, isn't built on sacrifice, it's built on identity. A woman who keeps her friendships, her ambitions, her boundaries, her opinions, her own plans for the weekend, even inside a relationship with someone emotionally distant, remains someone worth chasing, worth wondering about, worth coming back to. Not because she is trying to be chased, not because it is a strategy, but because she never stopped being herself in the first place, through all of it. Ask any woman who has come out the other side of a relationship like this, and she will tell you the same thing in different words. The version of her that got left behind wasn't louder or needier than she used to be. She was quieter, smaller, more careful, constantly editing herself in real time to avoid setting off a retreat she didn't fully understand. The tragedy isn't that he pulled away. The tragedy is that she pulled away from herself first, one small compromise at a time, long before he ever did. So let's bring all 6 of these together for a moment, because seeing them side by side changes how they feel. Chasing him when he withdraws, over-explaining yourself when insecurity flares up, reacting emotionally to his silence instead of regulating through it, being endlessly available at the cost of your own life, trying to fix him instead of simply loving him as he is, abandoning yourself piece by piece to keep the relationship intact. None of these come from weakness, not a single one of them. Every single one comes from love, from care, from genuinely wanting the connection to work out. That is exactly what makes them so hard to see clearly in yourself while you are living inside them. They don't look like mistakes from the inside. They look like devotion. But devotion aimed at someone who currently cannot receive it fully doesn't create closeness, no matter how much of it you offer. It creates distance, slowly, invisibly, patiently, until one day the connection that once felt so alive and so promising quietly runs out of air, without a single dramatic fight to point to. Here is something worth sitting with. None of these 6 patterns are unique to relationships with avoidant partners. You will find versions of them in friendships and family dynamics, even at work, anywhere a person quietly decides that being needed is safer than being wanted for who they already are. The reason they show up so sharply with an avoidant partner is simply that his response makes the pattern visible faster. He pulls away quickly, clearly in a way that is almost impossible to ignore. A more available partner might have let these same patterns run for years without ever surfacing them. In that strange way, this kind of relationship, painful as it is, can also become the fastest teacher you will ever have. The good news, and there is real good news here, is that none of this is permanent. These are patterns learned and repeated, not fixed identities carved into who you are. And patterns can be noticed, interrupted, and rebuilt, starting the exact moment you decide to stop performing love and start embodying value instead, quietly, consistently, without announcing it to anyone, without needing credit for the change. Value, real value, was never about proving yourself worthy of someone else's attention, no matter how much modern dating tries to convince you otherwise. It was always about remaining whole, remaining grounded, remaining fully yourself, whether someone chooses to stay close or chooses to create distance in response. An avoidant partner may never fully explain why he pulls away, not because he is hiding it from you, but because he often doesn't have the language for the fear underneath his own silence. But you don't need him to explain it in order to protect your own peace, your own identity, your own life. You only need to recognize these 6 patterns in yourself, honestly, without judgment, and choose again and again, one small moment at a time, to come back to your own center instead of chasing his. If even one of these 6 hit closer to home than you expected, closer than you were ready for, that is not a failure on your part. That is awareness, real awareness arriving right on time. And awareness is the first thing, the only thing really, that actually changes anything from here forward. So before you go, do the same 2 things again right now while you are thinking about it. Type the word value in the comments so this reaches more women who need to hear exactly this today. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because there is a lot more where this came from. Real psychology, explained the way it actually plays out in real relationships, not the version you read in a caption online. Take care of your peace quietly and consistently. Protect your softness without losing your spine in the process. Keep your friendships, keep your ambitions. Keep the version of yourself that existed long before this relationship and would still exist fully intact long after it, no matter which direction it goes. That woman, the one with her own center of gravity, was never the problem to begin with. And remember this, above everything else we talked about today. The right person was never supposed to make you disappear in order to be loved. He was supposed to make you feel safe enough to stay fully, completely yourself, exactly as you already are, without editing a single part of it to keep him close. If someone can only stay near you when you are smaller, quieter, and more careful than your true nature, that isn't closeness. That's a cage with soft edges. Real love has room for all of you, not just the parts that feel convenient to someone else's comfort. Whatever happens next in your own story, carry this one thought with you. Value was never something you had to earn through silence, through shrinking, through waiting patiently by a phone that might not ring. It was already yours the entire time, quietly waiting for you to stop giving it away, one small compromise at a time. Not something to chase, not something to prove, not something to earn back through more patience or more understanding than any one person should reasonably be asked to give. Just something to remember gently every single day, until remembering it becomes as natural as breathing.